only one candidate for controller, Brad Lander, knows that
Enough with the politicians. Enough with the incompetence.
We don't have a lot of time, but let's talk about your future plans.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us today on KRTD News. Third Fridays with Udis, myself. We got some interesting stories for you guys today. Let's take a look. Let's get to our first story. So the eviction moratorium is going to end this month. Local courts brace for surge in the eviction crisis. So nobody's really talking about this. I think I saw a couple people talking about this, but the eviction moratoriums are about to end, which means there's going to be mass homelessness and mass evictions, and nobody's gonna have money to pay the rent, especially after everything that just went down and the mortgages. What do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of rough. I mean, this is definitely going to be rough on people. People were talking during COVID. You know, one of the biggest concerns, especially in New York, was the rent, how people are going to pay it. That was a big deal. And now with these ending, I mean, it's going to be really, really rough on some people. You know, the question is, you also have landlords that need to be paid too, that can't be providing a service for free. So it's kind of a tough issue if you look at both sides of it, right? Landlords do have expenses and bills.
Of course.
Not all of them are super wealthy.
Well, no, but you can put it at the end. What you could do is, at least for mortgages, you can put the payments at the end rather than, if you owe $10,000 due tomorrow, they could say, okay, we're going to put these $10,000. If it's payments of $2,000 a month, they could say, we're putting these $2,000 payments at the end. You go back to paying the $2,000, and these payments are going to the end. You still have to pay it.
Right. I mean, the question is like, with ending it, I think they kind of assume that people went back to their jobs that would now have money to pay rent.
Yeah, but they're not going to have $10,000 out right off the bat. Like a lot of regular people won't.
Right. No, so definitely, I think, people started working a little bit earlier too. So it's not like we're just started, this is the first month of jobs. But at the same time, people are going back to work and people do need to be paid. Landlords do need to be paid. I kind of see both sides in this one. I think for people like us, we're like, oh, keep the memorandum. People are struggling, but then there's also landlords on the other side of it, and people should go back to work and do have jobs, which would mean an ability to pay. So
Of course, I think it means an ability to pay, but I don't think it means an ability to pay in full, especially with the mortgage. So I think that there needs to be something to work out so these tenants can work out arrangements with whoever they're paying with. There needs to be something put into place for that, because if they say the bill is due, I need $15,000, or you're out on the street tomorrow, the person is going to be screwed.
Right. Yeah. There should be some overlap to kind of cushion people a little bit if they need it.
Yeah, definitely. So, but this is going to be like 2008 all over again, I think.
I hope not, but this is a good, just heads up for people who have, are kind of assuming things are going as the way they were. They're not. The memorandum is ending this month. So it's also, kind of, I don't know if people are aware, but it could also be like a push for people to, kind of get their lives together and start going back to the way we were.
Absolutely. And everybody seems to be ignoring this story. I have hardly seen anybody cover it. Everybody wants to say, oh, well, everybody wants to bury it. Or I've seen some people like on MSNBC. I don't watch it, but the other day I did see somebody gloss over the story. They're like, oh, and the moratorium is about to end anyway. Other news. And I'm like, really?
Wow. I mean, if you want to deliver news of, deliver the news to the people about the people, what they should be aware of and concerned about. This is definitely high on the list.
You can't gloss over this and be like, well, the moratoriums are about to end anyway on 6th Street. This is happening. No.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what happens in New York, though, because, rent is already high, usually as is. And, we kind of took longer, the New York City than maybe New York State did.
That's true. Yeah.
Up, so people's jobs started later.
That's true. And it's going to be very difficult, especially for certain people. And in Congress, they want to do almost nothing about it. I heard Democrats say, well, nobody should be evicted from their home without a lawyer by their side. What is a lawyer going to do when you're being evicted?
Yeah.
Not really that much. And then some Republicans have said, oh, let's just go on and see what happens. You can't just see what happens. And you can't just give somebody a lawyer either. That's so. And when I heard them talking about that in March or April, the last time anybody even talked about this on Capitol Hill was March.
Like they're so out of touch with people. Like, first of all, just the fact that they seem so out of touch.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. How do you not talk about this since March or April when this is happening the end of this month?
And the fact that you say, give them a lawyer. Civil courts have a lawyer. Nobody likes those lawyers that they get. Or the fact that just let it see what happens. These are people. It's like they're completely out of touch from reality and the lives of people.
That's the debate that's going on. Now you can have a different debate. Maybe they pass a bill that says, okay, all mortgage payments go to the end, but you have to start paying immediately. Do what's due tomorrow. So if it's the $2,000 you pay for this month, you're gonna have to pay that $2,000. But whatever is left, it'll go towards the end of your payments. Pass a bill like that, because the landlord still gets paid, or not rather the landlord, the bank in this case would still get paid, but maybe they're not paid immediately. And with rent, you can maybe pass a bill. Okay, we're gonna do payment plans.
Right.
You still can be paid, but you got to pass a bill that is effective to the people. That's not gonna get them thrown out of their house.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it will be the 2008 housing crisis, just caused by something else.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and go to the next story here. So the U.S. is allegedly withdrawing from Afghanistan. I don't believe Joe Biden. Reason I don't believe him is because we've heard this before. They're evacuating. Oh wait, this is the wrong story. I'm looking. Okay, so the
No, I
U.S.
think there's two slides for this, I think, but
Two slides for this. Afghans who ate. Right. This is the one I was looking at. So, former President George W. Bush calls U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan a mistake. So, what's happening right now? Now, everybody don't be confused. Joe Biden is not withdrawing every single troop, or he might be, but there's also mercenaries that the U.S. hires that are still going to be there, and contractors and all kinds of stuff. So, we're not completely withdrawing from Afghanistan like he says we are. So,
also it's interesting. Like, I mean, it doesn't seem so much like a Joe Biden thing to do.
well, it's optics.
Right. I mean, it seems like a Democrat thing to do, definitely, but not Joe Biden. He was a little bit more conservative, or like seemed a little more conservative on the military.
Absolutely. I think that it's a lot, but it's a trick. They're going to. Barack Obama did this. George Bush did this. And Clinton's did this. What they do is they'll say, we're moving 2,000 troops out of Afghanistan. Those troops will then circle into Iraq or into some other base around the world, and then they'll just shuffle them back a year later. This is a trick that they do. And they say, well, we're withdrawing everybody. Now give me good press.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole issue of withdrawing or not, I mean, that's a Democrat or, versus Republican. They each take different positions on it, and I think really the ideal would be a balance between the two. But, I mean, this just seems, I think you're right. I think it really just seems like he's looking for good press right now, and trying to make a story, because it doesn't seem like him, and the story doesn't seem to be the reality.
No, and everybody forgets Donald Trump had a treaty when he was the president, had a treaty with the Afghani people that said, we'll withdraw on this date. Joe Biden comes into office and says, we say that. That was before. Now we're actually going to withdraw on September 11th or whatever, an American anniversary for optics, of course, with that. And then he says, anyway, remember when we said you wouldn't, he said this to the Taliban, he said, you promised you wouldn't do violence in the treaty. Okay, so now we're going to break the treaty, but now you have to not do violence.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. You can't. So it's basically, if I say I'll give you $500 for a television, and you say, okay, great. And then I say, I'm not going to give you the $500, but hand me that television.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think a lot of what they're trying to do is, basically just not do whatever Trump did, even if it was what they would have done or what they wanted to do, or even if he did something right, and then basically kind of use optics and media to make themselves seem like good people or seem like they're doing what's right.
U.S. breaks treaties every other week.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it, I mean, all these headlines, you have to admit that there is a difference between the media, the way it talks about Trump and the way it's talking about Biden. I mean, like, come on, if Trump did this, the media would not cover it.
No.
Or they would kind of have a negative spin on it. This is kind of something that, it just seems way too optics centered, pushing, trying to, along the lines of what they've been doing this whole time. Oh, look what Biden did. Yay, hooray, he's so great. And not showing anything, not bringing light to anything negative about anything he's been doing.
Exactly. Now, he never, the thing is, it's not really ending it either. It's also another lie, because again, even if you remove every single U.S. troop, there are people who are private contractors still going to be there, and the media will completely ignore that. Technically, the troops are out, but technically the U.S. is still there. And the media will say that we've completely withdrawn when we actually haven't.
Right. Yeah.
To give him good press.
Personally, I think it's, good not to fully withdraw, but, I agree with you. The media will definitely say that, look, but, we've completely withdrawn, hooray for us. And meanwhile, we probably haven't, or, we'll come back in soon.
Either withdraw or don't withdraw. Or tell us the truth about what you're doing, because this is just a lie. It's a blatant lie. Anyway, let's go on to the next. Do we have another story? Yes. So Spain's top court rules the pandemic lockdown is unconstitutional. The ruling said that limitations on movement violated citizens' basic rights.
I
So
like this one because
yeah, go ahead.
uh, in America, we were all trying to talk about this. Like everybody was saying, during the lockdowns, not everybody, but like a large portion of the country was saying this is unconstitutional. You can't tell us what to do. If we want to work, if we want to go out, we have the right to do that. This is America. And so it's amazing and interesting to see that Spain's top court actually ruled that it was unconstitutional.
Right. I also think that their lockdown may be a little bit different than ours because this one directly the limitations on movement. I think that they did a little bit more of a severe lockdown than the US, to my knowledge, as well. So that might have also been partially linked. Because I know the US
and
did.
I mean, our lockdown, I think our lockdown was in large talk and hype as opposed to, there were no cops around. You weren't getting a ticket if you went out, a certain hour. I
Yeah.
think maybe at night, there kind of was, but it really wasn't like an intense lockdown like people were making it seem. Basically, everyone voluntarily locked down. If I had to go out for a drive just to get fresh air, a walk, no one stopped me.
No, exactly.
I think a lot of it was, okay, we shut down the parks, we shut down our public places. That's not a lockdown, that's allowed. That's public property.
Yeah.
And people voluntarily locked down and did it themselves out of, the right thing to do. But while people were talking about it as being forced, a lot of it was voluntarily. Whereas in Spain, a little bit more.
You'll find out too that like they're as far as how they treated business owners and stuff like that during this was way different than what we treated ours here, right? They were giving things like a money essentially to stay open or to pay rents, things like that, as well as them already having medical care covered, as well as them already having basic needs met for the most part across the board, right? So
yeah, it was definitely a struggle, but we were, we did allow stations.
I'm just saying in relation to Spain, their court ruling this lockdown unconstitutional, right? I think part of it is in regards to that thing, right? Where there was probably more people willing to voluntarily stay at home if given the opportunity to do that, right? The amount of people who can't right now stay at home because they've got 3 kids to feed and no one else is putting bacon on the table, right? It's rough for people, right? Which is why I think it's why I think you see like so much pushback here in the States about it, right? Whereas a lot of other countries are like, yeah, it was a thing, it was whatever, we've moved on, right? America's still kind of stuck in this limbo of, are we going back to work? Are we not? But people are afraid of the little any control the government wants to put on people right now. People are afraid of. So I get it.
The U.S. completely set up the lockdowns. I think the U.S. made a lot of mistakes at the beginning of COVID. I think that if I were, you didn't even have to do a lockdown for as long as you did if you did one. So there was one country, I think I don't remember which one it was. They did a 3-week lockdown with masks, very basic. They closed all the public places. And then they gave basic needs to their people for that 3 weeks. And then after those 3 weeks, they started opening things back up slowly. And then by now, I think that I can't remember which country it is right now, but I think they're completely pretty much open at this point because they had a program where this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, and they laid that out in the beginning.
I was a big supporter of keeping it voluntarily and not closing down the stores. Like in my opinion, if somebody is susceptible to catching a cold in the winter and they need to wear a mask to prevent that from happening, and I know someone that happened to, they go out with a mask on their own because they know that they can get hurt really badly if they catch a cold. Once the education and information is out and people know that they're in danger, I can't imagine stores allowing, 50 people in a store, in a small store, without masks or anything like that.
Well, then
I think the stores would have taken it on themselves and they could have still got business like that. But I think once the information and we knew what was out there, the lockdown, the stores being closed lasted way longer than it had to be.
Well, that's true. That's why I said what we should have did was 3 weeks and then evaluated after a 3 week period. Okay, what do we do now? Let's look at the numbers. It's been 3 weeks. Are we ready to open back up? How much can we open back up? And then act, but it seemed like everybody was scrambling in each state to figure out what to do because nobody thought, what are we going to do? And this was also partially, it was, and everybody wants to just blame the federal government and just blame Trump, but it's not even just him. It was every single politician who was in charge of something during COVID screwed something up.
Yeah.
And New York did it the worst. Cuomo and de Blasio really did. First of all, they were on completely different pages the entire time, making fools of each other. And then you had one saying wear a mask, one saying don't wear a mask, and then you had one saying I'm going by these numbers, and one saying, well, I'm going by these numbers. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
In a state like New York, the mayor and the governor absolutely have to be on the same page. Otherwise, it's complete chaos because the city is like 40% of the state.
Yeah. Yeah. And then people were getting in trouble for opening. I mean, such sad stories. People were getting in trouble for opening their stores. And, you know, you saw these videos of like these women who, business owners or, you know, single moms like crying, being like, I'm not letting anyone in without a mask. I'm wiping everything down. I just need money to afford rent and to support my kid. And, you know, the New York City officers, which is what they were told to do, were saying, no, you have to close down. And I think it just hurt so many people. And it really was unnecessary. The information was out there. We knew what to do.
Exactly. And some essential businesses, like a lot of people were scrambling. Hey, what is an essential business? What does that even mean? Like sometimes they're a little bit unclear. And I don't know if I think at one point they even closed veterinary offices, which should have actually been considered an essential business.
Yeah. 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 I agree with that.
Yeah, why are you doing that? It's like, you're not closing the doctor's office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. But the other thing I was going to say is New York also, everybody did so poorly, but then you have the governor writing a book about how well he did during COVID and all this stuff.
So
The mayor and the governor botched it up in the beginning so bad. We had the highest numbers in the country at one point. We were a hotspot all over New York. They screwed it up so badly. And
in
nobody
the midst
remembers.
of it, in the midst of it, our politicians were writing about how great they are.
And then I was hearing something, other countries are looking at what Cuomo was doing, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Maybe writing a book, maybe, you know, for like the political position of, you know, how to, maybe for the idea of writing a book, but certainly not for how to run a state.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the next story here. 120 German politicians, journalists, and artists sign a letter urging Merkel to confront Biden over Assange's extradition to the U.S. So a lot of people don't know the story about Julian Assange at all because nobody talks about it. So what Julian Assange did was, well, he was connected with WikiLeaks, which everybody gives a bad stigmatism to because of the nonsense of Russiagate and everything. Somehow they connect that. Because whatever, let me go back a little bit further. So during the 2016 election, Julian Assange leaked Hillary Clinton's emails on WikiLeaks. And in response, Russiagate was created because it showed that Hillary Clinton was cheating during the primaries. Now, this is not why Assange is on trial. Assange is on trial because of the Iraq war logs. But it's not just that showed the U.S. was committing a lot of war crimes, and he released that. But the thing is, the U.S. holds a grudge against him because he exposed what happened during that election. He exposed the Iraq war logs. Therefore, he keeps exposing things that the U.S. does wrong. So their solution is let's extradite him and probably torture him if they ever get him back to the U.S.
Yeah. I'm actually curious to hear your position on this. I'm more of a libertarian on this, you know, and would kind of stand with Assange and, you know, the people around him saying that, you know, I mean, okay, he did something wrong by leaking information, right? That we can agree on. You work in a company, the information is private information, you know, all confidential, you leak that. There's something wrong with that, right? You get fired from your position.
Mm.
That's, you know, that should be what happens. I think there's a lot of like political, personal animosity coming against him. it is the process of the US, you know, kind of like to hold him accountable for it. I think it was a little bit too far when people asked Biden to remove charges against him. But I also think that, you know, they're providing people, he was a whistleblower, but on the other hand, the whistleblowers, on one hand, they really are people looking out for the greater good, right? They're just trying to promote freedom of speech and provide information that they think is valuable to the people. I think they may have done it wrong.
Exactly. Now, I
Well,
appeared on act. I was
with
gonna say, I
with
appeared on
Assange,
Action. Hold on.
As-
I appeared on Action for Assange a couple of weeks ago. Action for Assange is a group that we co-stream here, who has been following this case since the beginning, and they've been trying to get him to basically get him acquitted or stop him from being executed. I appeared on there a couple of weeks ago. Can we go ahead, Ruth?
well, I was saying, you know, Assange's only crime is publishing. You know, like he's just been right. The only thing he's done is publish whistleblowers' information, which have most, you know, I would say he's got 100% track record on having that information be truthful, right? You know,
WikiLeaks has never had to print a retraction.
never had to retract anything, right? Which is pretty good odds compared to, you know, their mainstream competitors, right? And you look at who gave them that information. Yeah, like all those whistleblowers who came out, none of those whistleblower protections that are supposed to be in place were used. You know, they all essentially had to leave the country or run from the CIA. You know, they're all somewhere else right now. You know, even Greenwald, who was only a middleman in that regard, is in Brazil, right? Like, you know, so Assange was.
Talk about freedom of speech. I mean, this is just so against that entire concept. You know,
Right.
I mean, this is literally somebody who found out, you know, something and it was telling people about it. I mean,
Yeah.
if he did it on the corner of his block, would you be treating him the same way?
You go back to all the stuff he's pulled out, you know, the double tapping incident with, you know, where we were swinging helicopters back around to hit civilians and stuff, among the, you know, NSA spying programs that Snowden, you know, released, you know, Chelsea Manning's statements, like, and then on top of that, the Podesta emails and so on and so forth. You know, it's only now that the Democrats have decided to not like him, right? You know, when not that long ago, when he was, you know, bringing up stuff on Bush or whatever, he was a pariah. You know, they were very happy to have him. So
Everybody forgets 10 years ago, a room full of liberals applauded him.
Right? And now what? Because he decided to put some stuff up on Hillary Clinton, everyone's out to get him, right? So, you know, this whole thing with him rotting in jail right now is such a blatant use of governmental power to silence publicists that, you know, every journalist in America should be covering this story tenfold, right? And why they don't, I don't get.
But it's really scary for journalists. I mean, they
Yeah.
can be using a threat to people to say, you know, if you say something bad about us, if you put out something negative about us, here's what we're going to do. We'll come against you and won't forgive you.
Well,
But I want to play.
and
Ruth, you're going to hate me for this, but I want to play that clip.
Well, we've played it before. People can go back to look at our
people
Friday
can go back.
shows.
Tell,
you know,
was it
David
last-
Packman's thoughts on Julian Assange is that he doesn't think about
everybody-
him. Which, if you're a
Go look at my
journalist, you definitely should be, right?
Mhm.
You
We're not
know,
gonna play the clip now, but I asked David Packman. This is another indie guy.
Yeah,
you know,
he asked him what he
very-
thought about him, and he said pretty much that he doesn't, and that explains a lot about Packman, right? You know, like to me, this is a thing when you're looking at this story and also looking at other stories where Biden wants you to, you know, tattletale on anyone with extremely left voices as well as extreme right voices, right? You know,
I got an ad on on Facebook that says, if any of your neighbors are extremists or friends, please report it to this place. And I'm like, what?
Right. Tara Reid's content has been getting flagged on there, you know, as well as censorship on YouTube. Matt Orfala, you know, and his friends, and you know, I know Hardlands got pulled for like their whole channel was pulled for a while, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're even worried about, you know, they can't even say this man's name. You know, they feel like, right? You know, you're not even allowed to say his name on YouTube necessarily. You know, without the possibility of your whole channel getting nuked, right? So, you know, this is on top of every bit of free speech that we have that we had online is trying to be chipped away, and mainstream media pushed harder, right? And we're just, mainstream media continues to ignore some of the biggest, you know, free speech attacks out there, you know, but they're willing to get mad when Trump yells at a journalist, right? Like that, like that's an attack on journalism, not putting Julian Assange in a jail cell for, and it's not like Julian wasn't already in a jail cell. He was already in an embassy, stuck there, you know, like.
Yeah.
What is he supposed to do? He can't see his kids. He can't see his fiance. He can barely talk to his lawyers, right?
And then everybody on mainstream media makes this about the emails when it's about the Iraq war logs. They'll bring like, well, the Hillary Clinton emails. I'm like,
because I think the emails are what's like the political pressure to
right. Right. When Bill
but it has nothing to do with the case.
Part of that is that, you know, people are wanting to throw that on Russia, and that Assange is part of the Russian, you know, consulate or whatever they want to claim, right?
And then the other thing is the US's top witness said that they were lying about almost everything.
On top of Bill Binney, on top of Bill Binney claiming that, like, look, from what he saw in the numbers, those emails that everyone's so upset about couldn't have been pulled from a Russian source. It couldn't even been pulled from something remotely. He thinks it was someone inside the building with a flash drive pulling it off that network, right? You know, so, you know, you start getting into further conspiracy there, but, you know, when Donna Brazil is closing her blinds when Seth Rich commits suicide, and she writes that in her book, there's definitely things going on there that we're not necessarily privy to. So I don't know. I'm hoping, you know, I know a bunch of countries, Ireland, Australia, and Germany, they've all been looking at Assange and trying to protect him. At least a lot of them. And I'm hoping
Mexico too. Mexico offered him sanctuary if he can get there, which he can't.
Right. The thing is right now is the extradition case, right? You know, I think the case that Australia was having against him for these rape allegations, that the main witness or whatever, I don't know what the guy they've been questioning with the main body of accusations pretty much came out saying he was lying, right?
He said what he said was the CIA or the US promised me immunity for my crimes as a pedophile if I lied about Julian Assange.
Right.
He came out and said that on the stands recently.
On the stand. And we're still going to try to extradite him. For what? What is he being extradited to the States for? Publishing?
Well, I don't think they're going to drop the charges, though. I don't think
No.
Our politicians are way too petty for that. I don't think they're going to drop
But what's worse for them? Going through this case and having a jury rule that he's innocent, or, you know, just having it go away? Like,
they're going to
that's
fight tooth and nail until the end. Even
exactly.
if you know,
I don't know. I wouldn't bet on the jury's.
Well, Julian, if you're listening, protect yourself at all times, right? Like, make sure that you're not gonna end up the next morning dead. That's all I'm saying.
The other thing, he can't even go to Mexico for sanctuary. You heard what happened. There's a guy, this hacker, Commander X, was given sanctuary in Mexico. The U.S. literally went in and ripped him out of an apartment and brought him back to the U.S. And they broke international law doing that. They're not, and now that's a case that's going to be going on because the U.S. violated sanctuary terms of another country. They violated the international borders.
Everyone should go check A4A's coverage on that, and just the coverage of Assange, which has been pretty outstanding. So, you know, Misty and Andrew do a pretty great job over there on that. So
yeah, they'll be live here tomorrow night. So
Yep.
everybody can check. Not tomorrow night, on Tuesday night
All right.
and Saturday night.
I'm hitting
everybody
this
check
next
them
slide.
out. Yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. Although Shane, that was crazy what you said about the ad you saw where they were telling people to tell on their neighbors if they're extremists.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
like,
ridiculous.
I mean, all about community and unity and being nice to each other. I mean, convincing people to rat out their neighbors.
Right. It's literally 1984 stuff right there. It's literally
Yeah.
Orwellian stuff. Like that's like thought policing. That's what that is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's crazy. Even you know, the amount of times I hear my father complain about being in Facebook jail, you know, for something he's put up is you know, it's crazy. Not that I don't think he needs to be put in there occasionally, but you know, like
but that's
just to
like,
give
you
him
know,
a break from it.
it's like, imagine if people were, you know, finding their neighbors with, you know, weed in an illegal state, and then they
Yeah.
put up these signs, tell on your neighbors if they're smoking
Yeah.
weed. I mean, like,
Right.
what?
Well, and
Exactly.
it's like so we have there's 18
And
states.
I love this. Hang on, I really
plus
like this picture.
The
down there.
picture,
It's fun.
yeah.
too.
This
Yeah,
is a
that
great
is cute.
this is a great move. Yeah. Also, whoever wrote this article, which I think was Fox News, right? I forget.
No.
I should have pulled
This
the,
was
the thing.
CNBC or
CNBC.
CBS.
something like
One of
that.
them.
I definitely caught the artist rolling out. Yeah, we get it. Thank you for the pun. But here's my thought on this. As my name is literally Reef, pretty hard to get away from the weed stories from me. But you know, the proposal calls for removing marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, which is essentially, I think they're just trying to pull it off that Schedule 1 thing. Which great, I appreciate it. It lets states do more of their state duties of deciding themselves, right? But it would be nice if we can just federally legalize it at this point. Like I don't see why anyone now. I think from what I saw on coverage through Hardlands covered this yesterday, and a few other places talked about it. But they were saying things like they pulled clips from CNN and stuff about how they don't think it'll pass, right? And you know, you need all the Democrats and 10 Republicans, and I would find it so funny, right, if the Republicans just decided to you know, stick it to the Democrats who don't think this bill is going to be passed, and they decide to get 20 to 30 Republicans to vote for this. I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, I'm a Republican, you know, libertarian on social issues.
Right.
I'm on board with this. You know, like
Yeah.
I think there are Republicans that would be cool with this.
Exactly.
I think if you don't want your kid smoking marijuana, that's your issue. You control your kid. It's your child. On a
Right.
national level, you know, let people do what they want to do.
Now,
I think-
this is the thing. The U.S. is the most careful about controlled substances. If you go to France, kids start drinking at 10 years old, and they hardly have any alcoholics. They have like a 2% rate of alcoholics. The U.S. makes everything taboo. And when you make everything taboo, then everybody wants to do it more.
Well, and
That's
you
what
look
the
at
U.S. doesn't seem to understand.
you look at Britain with a high drinking culture, pubs on every corner in every village,
Mhm.
right? You know, you're talking about. They also have a pretty strict law on marijuana, although I think they've started to come off that recently, right? You
Well,
know,
yeah.
so much so
So-
that my brothers in England, you know, have to roll their weed with tobacco because they don't have access to as much weed, right? You know, it's all spliffs over there. It's not joints at all. Too
Exactly.
much weed
If you
used.
make something illegal, then people want it more.
People want it
Also,
more.
I mean, you're using up our police resources, right?
Yeah,
Like, if you have
absolutely.
that, this is
My-
what we
my-
want our cops doing.
My uncle was head of the gang unit in Pueblo, Colorado, which is right outside Denver, right? And you know, I was asking him during that period when Colorado was switching over to recreational pot, and he was going, it's a massive weight off the shoulders of his police force, right? Because now not only do the gang traffic, it doesn't have as much resource to just throw around, right? You know, they're going to have to find other revenues of, you know, money making, right? You know, so you're able to focus on stuff that's more hard drugs. You're able to focus on murders and robberies and things like that. You're able to just your resources as far as going to that are concerned are are better. Now, part of this is quotas for, you know, incarceration, right? We all know how the private prison system likes to do this, right? It's an easy thing to go, okay, they had marijuana on them, check the box, send them to, you know, a state penitentiary, and, you know, let them figure out how that works, right? So two things, right? I think my issues with a lot of these laws, right, and especially when we're going state by state, right, is that, for one, those laws are so vastly different state to state that it's hard to, you know, differentiate. And what's been happening is that because it's state by state, and the American public are so on board for this, right? You know, it's overwhelming support generally. When Florida passed it, Florida has those rules on the books for you have to get a super majority to get a referendum passed, right? So you have to get over 60% of the vote, which we did for medical marijuana. The issue is, in Florida, you need things called vertical integration, right? You have to be able to control every part of that business. You have to be able to afford every part of that business, which is the real kicker, right? It's, you know, I can't just run a grow operation myself. I have to run a grow operation, a distributing service, a dispensary, testing services, right? You know, it's you have to be able to control the entire chain of business there, right? Or you
It would
can't
be like saying a liquor store has to make the alcohol, they have to test the alcohol, they
have to grow the grain to make the alcohol. like it's that, right? So the only people that are able to do this right now are the ones that are already wealthy, right? You know, that's what's happening here in Florida. And I know a bunch of other states are trying to sneak the laws in that, like, well, only 5 people in the state can grow. You know, they can only, like, it's little rules, and people are so willing, because they see free weed on the docket, that they click the Xbox, right? You know, they vote that easy, and it's like, oh, well, now we're stuck either having to rewrite the law, which is of course harder, right? Or waiting to get a better law, which won't happen, right? So,
exactly.
You know, to me, if you did it on a federal level, right, you'd be able to have a much bigger microscope on it, right? You're able to have the national public look at it and go, okay, this is bad, this isn't bad. You'll have organizations like NORML, the National Organization for Marijuana Legalization, right, who go support them if you can. You know, they try to deal with these state by state issues and support them and
there's
do
actually
organizing
a party
and
I think
Yeah.
it's also a good idea because it shows kind of the national dialogue and what people are thinking.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's also
And especially with stories coming out about, and I'm gonna butcher her name, but the runner Shahari, I can't remember her name.
I don't know her name. Gorgeous nails.
Yeah, crazy good at relay, right?
Yeah.
And she gets popped for marijuana, right? Like, the UFC already, they're not doing that anymore. They're not testing for marijuana. So, you know, fighters are able to smoke. And I don't, you know, I'm a big UFC nerd. And if you go back all the way back to Pride days, right? We have, I think, which Diaz brother was it? It was Nick or Nate, one of the two, right? I want to say it was the older one, which is, I think, Nate. I think Nick or Nate, anyway, fighting Tokagomi in Pride, right? Which this was a big fight back in the day. And essentially it's the Diaz brother. He's going to get the strap. He's going to get the belt. He's about to win this championship. He wins the fight. Now, he piss tests 3 times the normal levels of THC, right? You know, way above the limit, right? And back then they said that, you know, it was a performance enhancing drug because it numbed this man's pain. And it's like, watch any other Diaz fight when he's not high. The guy doesn't feel pain. He just keeps going until he's dead or knocked out. That's the only 2 things Diaz brothers do. They don't care if they're bleeding. They don't care if you're going to rip their arm out of you. They're just going to keep going. But no, they blamed it on weed then. Now the UFC, who doesn't want things like that to happen again, has given up that stuff. I know the NBA, I think, has given that up as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little different when we're talking about companies and employment
Yeah.
versus a national level for somebody who, you know, doesn't work at a company or, you know, just doesn't work at a company that doesn't allow it. I would say companies have the right, and, you know, I don't necessarily agree with them, you know.
Well, there's a bunch of industries that
just say,
it wouldn't be great to have.
Don't come to work high, like they say, don't come to work drunk.
Part of that is there's no good test. There's no breathalyzer to say like, okay, you were high 5 minutes ago, right? And then you ran your boat into the bridge, and now New York Harbor is closed, right? Like those, like that's the thing, right? I know the Coast Guard is pretty much making sure that any maritime industry is not using that proponent, right? Which you know, guys are on leave for 40 days at a time or more, depending on where they're stationed and where they're going and what they're doing, right? You know, and then they get off time.
If you're living on the land, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Not be allowed.
Right.
Big job. You know, if your employer says this, you know, you need this focus or whatever for, okay, fine, you can make up your own rules and I'll choose if I want to work there.
Yeah.
But living in America, you know, I mean, doing nothing, vacation, whatever you're doing, I don't think that's right.
And I think we're having a good conversation when it comes to food, but I think that's only step one. A lot of people, you know what the thing the U.S. spends the most money on? One of the things every year is the war on drugs itself. The war on drugs itself creates so much gang violence. It creates so much, gives gangs and
it's also one of the biggest reasons, you know, we're even getting illegal immigration is because weed is a controlled substance here, and you know they're able to
controlled substances. If you end the war on drugs and you make every single thing legal, then the violence will stop, because guess what? Then they can't control cocaine anymore. On that one little dealer guy in your neighborhood is not going to be able to control it.
I think there's two things with that too, right? There's, you know, you look at countries that do this a lot better than us, right? You know, places, a lot of them are the Nordic ones who, you know, especially Amsterdam and stuff like that, who don't necessarily make it not illegal, right? It's like meth is illegal there, right? You know, there's plenty of substances that are illegal to have without prescriptions there, right? And the only thing they do differently is that it's not necessarily a criminal offense, right? It's your sentencing is much different. It's obviously you need help and we're going to help you, right? We're going to get you into a rehab service that's not affiliated with, you know, a religion or whatever. They take that out of it. They're just making sure that you get, you know, adequate assistance, right? And they usually try to look at the underlying reasons, which is the big difference, right? They go, okay, why are you using? What position? How can we help that position, right? So that you don't go back to using, right? You know, it's preemptive stuff, and we're stuck here, you know, with people that, you know, for one, our healthcare system makes it to where, you know, everyone is self-medicating for the most part, right? To some degree, you know, because they feel like they can't get adequate care elsewhere. Right, especially for mental health, right? Everyone's struggling there. So I don't know. You know, I hope this bill goes through to some degree. I need to go through and look at the exact writings and stuff to make sure they've not tried to like sneak some stuff in there, which of course they will. They have. Yeah, I would love to make writers illegal actions in Congress. I think they're the dumbest thing. I don't know how you enforce that, but I'm so tired of seeing the happy fun time bill get thrown in with, you know, some other like, you know, pet project that one congressman has, and it sneaks through and it causes people to not vote on a good bill because some other dumb things in there, right? There should be
that idea of like increased transparency and accountability for Congress is something that both parties agree with. The only people that don't are the politicians.
Right? You know, there's two, you know,
I'm assuming, I think it's like a super majority of American citizens agree with it. Basically everyone does. Right.
Well, and Congress is set up right now to be super slow at doing anything, right? And part of that is because, you know, everyone, you look at, you know, I think it was Ron Paul complaining that a bill was, you know, 200 pages and they didn't have time to read it before they voted on it.
No, that was Bernie in a clip from 1990 something where he had this 800-page bill, and he's like, and they expect us to vote on this tonight.
Like, they just got it this morning or
hours
something.
ago.
Right. And part of that is because there's, you know, I think you need a committee, right? That essentially their sole purpose is looking for writers. And if the bill doesn't pertain to what it says on the box, right, then, you know, that bit needs to be taken out, right?
Right.
You know,
Each thing
put it
should
in
be
its
voted
own
for separately.
right. And it's
Now,
also, you know, you have to also make sure a committee is watching to make sure things don't get stuck in committee, right? Because that's most of bills die because they're stuck in committee somewhere because someone
Now, here's
isn't
the thing,
approving them. So
you could also do this through executive order. A lot of people don't
for
know
sure
that Joe Biden could do this through. Now, this is also something Bernie Sanders could have gotten out of him if he said, you know what, I'm not going to endorse you unless you publicly agree to legalize marijuana by executive order on day one. He could have said that.
Yeah.
Instead, he settled for a little task force.
Yeah. I mean, and got nothing from that. Right. So
he could have said, you know what I want? He could have said, there's an echo.
Yep. I don't know where it's at, but it's one of yours.
Basically, what he could have said was, all right, I need to give something material to my constituents to get them your support. You know what they like? They like weed.
Yeah.
You give them their weed on day one, I'll support you. No problem. Give them their weed.
Yeah, I mean,
Someone should have recommended that. Yeah.
It's way past due at this point. Way past due.
Yeah. But
I think we've covered this story enough for sure.
Let's go to the next one. We're almost through here. What else do we have? Oh, the New York City primary results. So there's 2 slides here. This is Eric Adams has won the Democratic primary, and who has won the Republican primary. Let's go to the next slide and take a look at that. So this is Curtis Sliwa. So
yeah.
Can
we just point attention to how few people voted? What is it, like less than 1 million?
So 404,397. So a little over 800,000 people voted for mayor for the Democrats, and let's see how many voted for the Republicans. So, and the Republicans, only under 100,000 showed up for the Republican primary,
and close to 1 million people voted in this election. That's really sad, considering how many people are in New York City.
Well, you also got to consider not everybody in New York City is a Democrat or Republican. Some people are not registered to either party, so you also have to factor that in.
That's true, but there wasn't a very high turnout.
What's the percentage of New York do you think voted? Like 15%, 20%?
I would.
There are 8.419 million people in New York. Let's say that 3 million are unregistered. Let's say 3 million are not registered to a party.
That's not very high for New York, because usually, I think in New York, when you go in, they'll like automatically a lot of times like register you as Democrat or check.
Right, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Even if 3 million people are unregistered to a party or independent, that's still over 5 million people who should have voted in the election, even if we give that generous number.
Now, can you two explain why Catherine Garcia got Manhattan?
That's a great question. Manhattan, well, Catherine Garcia, I believe, was also in the de Blasio administration.
Okay.
So she's a typical Democrat politician, and now Manhattan likes the status quo because there's a lot of wealthy people in Manhattan. There's a lot of people who are just very who just want to keep everything the same, and they don't want to rock the boat at all. So they're like, hey, let's just keep with Catherine Garcia. She was with de Blasio. Nothing needs.
I'm interested in your and both of your thoughts on 2 different things. Who did you support? Like, who did you support, Shane, for this, right?
So there was different phases in the campaign. So I don't normally care for Democrats these days, but there was a point where I was like, Scott Stringer's okay, you know, he's not that bad. Then I saw all these sexual assault allegations against him. I'm like, not that one. There was a point where I was really excited about Andrew Yang. Then I saw all the stuff he did, backpedaled on all of his policies. I'm like, not that one. And then I ended up, I'm like, you know, Maya Wiley is talking about police reform, but I hate her on all the other policies. Right. Maybe her. You know who I voted for? There was a guy running in the Democratic primaries. Prince Lover something something guy, and I'm like, great, I'll vote for him. It said he had all these very lefty policies.
And
He wasn't a serious candidate, and I voted for him.
and how do both of you feel about Eric Adams' policies and just overall, how do you think they'll do?
I think Eric Adams, I as much as I don't support his grounds, his political views. I will say that I think he did campaign the most. And in terms of who deserves it, right? Who campaigned the hardest, I would give that to Eric Adams. I think he did campaign the hardest. In terms of as a politician and his views, he kind of reminds me of an AOC a little bit. Doesn't really know what he's doing. Probably just, kind of just wants that AOC kind of buzz. Doesn't really seem too strong on anything or really, to know what he's doing or really care about, these views as much as kind of being a politician.
Well, exactly. I would say it's a little bit different. I would say the issue I have also, I know a lot of people who live in Brooklyn. None of them like Eric Adams, and he was their borough president. None of them liked Eric Adams. The younger people in Brooklyn all hate Eric Adams. So let's start with that. Second of all, I think Eric Adams is also giving you the illusion. If you actually listen to when he speaks, he says he's talking about police reform, but what he's really talking about is not police reform. He's talked about like increasing the budget significantly. I don't really care about the police budget too much. It's like, do some reforms and do that. But he doesn't, that was the issue where he was like very wishy-washy on, and I don't trust him in the area of law enforcement at all, because he's going to be biased because he was a former police officer. He's going to be extremely biased.
Well, and New York policing is such a weird, because you're such an urban environment across the entire, metropolitan area, right? It's funding is so weird when in regards to that, right? Because you're not necessarily going to be able to purchase your armored tank that the rest of the police forces in the country are allowed to spend their funding on, right? You're pretty much having to pay for like beat cops. So
exactly.
Yeah, and Catherine Garcia is kind of, she's the kind of person, she's had experience, definitely that. And she's more of the doer, she's the kind of person, who can fix anything. There's a problem in government, give it to her, she'll fix it. And I think aside from her, being more of the status quo, I think that kind of spoke to Manhattan more. She was more the status. She had a position. She had experience. And
Wall Street was comfortable with her, is what you're saying.
Right. She had a reputation of her work that everybody knew her as being the person who was able to clean things up, get it done, make things happen, hold down a business. She was the kind of person, if I would pick everyone, honestly, who can run a city well, I would have picked her. If I would have picked her.
What kind of power does the New York City mayor actually wield, right? I know they have control over the police, funding and stuff in New York.
They're basically a governor of a small state. They're basically the governor of a small state, essentially.
Yeah,
they have a lot of power.
Influential state too, and all the congressmen that you're influencing who want to do you favors so you can do them favors. I mean, there's a lot in it. It's
the mayor has to interact. The mayor basically is the second most. So New York State, the city council basically usually bends to the mayor, right. And the state senate and the state house will bend to the governor. So if you're not the mayor or the governor, on occasion you'll see some shifts from that. But if you're not the mayor or the governor, you don't have any real power in New York.
Well, I'm surprised to see Yang so far down. I think part of his, his stance with Israel and Palestine probably, you're trying to ride the fence in that sentence and pissing off both parties, right? Because if you're not
campaign as hard as Adams did.
He didn't. He said, "I ran for president."
He was hoping to have the name recognition.
Going to carry him.
Right,
yeah.
And he didn't
look at.
He didn't really talk about a lot from what I saw. Now I don't know about local stuff that you guys saw. We need to talk about like what he was actually going to do for New York, or
he also,
mayor specific policy.
His UBI policy. So let's talk about that. First, he says, "I'm going to give everybody $1,200 a month." Then he says, "You know what? Did I say that? I meant actually $2,400 a year." And then he says, "Well, based on certain things," and he changes that policy every other week. And I'm like, your main policy is UBI, and you don't understand how the New York City budget works, and you don't even understand, you can't even decide which UBI you're going to go for.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
your main policy, and you're making a mess of it.
How much did ranked choice voting affect this vote, do you think?
A lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
For the good or for the worse? Did the Republican primary also have ranked choice?
I think it did, but let's take a look at that.
So
There's only 2 candidates.
Yeah.
My thing is, you need ranked choice in the. Now I want to talk about Curtis Silla for a minute. So the only 2 things
campaigned a lot. He campaigned a lot. He definitely deserved it.
I saw floats in my neighbor, like they were literally floats. People were driving Curtis Silla like little parade floats down the street. I saw, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
Now he's an interesting one. So he started the Guardian Angels, and he was a talk show host. The Guardian Angels are basically, you could look at them in a couple different ways. They're like, they do stuff in the subways, I think, kind of policey, but they're basically self-appointed cops. And then but the other
people where like cops fail.
Pretty much, yeah. But the other thing is that I actually agree with him on. He wants to end kill shelters, which actually is not a bad idea.
Well, and
I think that's a good idea.
For New York,
Curtis,
I know
Curtis is a good guy, and Curtis is, first of all, he's a good guy. I mean, because he started the Guardian Angels, right? He does good on the side, as he's not just a politician. He actually does good on his free time. But I like him because he's the one to really cool personality. If you've ever met him, like really cool, chill guy. But he's the one to go on the corner and talk to the homeless guy as if he was, anyone, the president of the United States, and say, hey, what do you think we can do for the city? What do you want? And listen, like that's the kind of guy Curtis is. He's just super chill and will talk to anyone, and is very, when people start, throw rumors about him, he's like, why don't you guys talk to me? Like what's going on? I think he really cares, and he has his heart in the right place. And so I actually think he'd make a really good mayor. He can get things done. He showed that, and he really cares, and he's gone around to a lot of people, like individually through the streets, and really like heard people out, spoken to them.
And Fernando Mateo was an interest. The only thing I know about him is he was a taxi driver union guy, right? That's the thing, I think.
Yeah, I don't know much about him. I know he did campaign though. I will give that to him, but not as much as Curtis. But
he did, yeah. The only thing I know about it, yeah, he was running. He was running on the medallions, trying to fix that. Now he didn't have a lot of concrete solutions that he talked about. I'm like, okay, that's actually an issue important to me. So I'm like, okay, he's talking about the taxi medallions, but he's not talking about what he would actually do if he was mayor to deal with the taxi drivers going bankrupt. You're just saying that's a problem.
I think for conservative candidates a lot too, rhetoric works better for them, right? When they're able to run compared to Democratic rhetoric doesn't work as well, in my opinion, right?
Yes.
It's very hard for Democrats to have no substance and expect to win, right? Whereas Republicans can just be the nice guy who talks about freedom and personal liberties, and no one really pushes back on that, as far as like they do that much better than
a lot of the mindset amongst Republicans is that character matters first. So if I like your character, I think you're a good person, I think you're going to stand for my values, and you're going to do what's right, I'll vote for you. That's a lot of times.
And it's a lot of which character relates to me more.
Who understands me, who sticks by my values.
It's not necessarily a moral decision all the time, right? Like, because Trump's far on the scale of weird morals.
Understood.
Yeah,
but Trump understood those working class Americans,
right?
That you can give him.
Yeah, he sounds like he's speaking to me. That's what he sounds like. He sounds like he's speaking right to me, and I like what he says.
Are about.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what Republicans are about. We want a representative up there.
Yeah.
Getting back to the mayoral election a little bit, my thing is great. You've used ranked choice voting in the primaries. Now, we need to move ranked choice voting to the general election. This will also, and the other thing is, a lot of people don't know about this. The only 1/3 party. Well, technically, 3/3 parties have ballot lines in the election, but the Conservative Party is going to give their line to Curtis, and the Working Families Party is going to give their line to Adams. So the only party that has a ballot line that besides the Democrats and Republicans this time is the Libertarian Party. The Greens lost their ballot line when they ran Howie Hawkins, who was a pretty weak candidate for president.
I wonder who the Libertarians are going to give it to, because Curtis is. I wouldn't be surprised if they gave it to Curtis, but on the other hand, they like to give it to the winning candidate, and everyone would assume the Democrat's going to win, just because they want favors and stuff like that.
Well, I think they're actually going to have their own candidate for mayor.
Really?
I know some people in the Libertarian Party. They're running a candidate. Forgot her name. Let's Google that really quick.
Oh yeah, we're past 3:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're wrapping up.
Stacey Pressman. Stacey Pressman is going to be getting their whoever she is. I don't know much about her. Is getting their ballot. I just want to go to the Trump story, and then we're going to be finished here. Let's go to that one.
We can cover because these are the comptroller race, right? This one went pretty short. Yep, we got 2. We're good. We got
Corey
some time.
Johnson, the former Speaker of the City Council, and then Brad Lander beat him. And Brad Lander has a really terrible ad, a really cheesy ad. Let's just look at this. Weird ad.
Only one candidate for controller, Brad Lander, knows that to deliver bold, transformative change, you have to work for and with the people.
In the City Council, Brad never backed down from a righteous fight.
Brad knows everyone deserves a fighting chance to make it in New York.
That's why Brad will hold companies accountable for not paying people of color and women fairly.
I'm with Brad.
I'm with Brad.
I am with Brad.
I'm voting for Brad Lander for controller.
Paid for by Lander for NYC.
I hate that ad, not because I don't like some of the not because I never liked some of the politicians in there, because they all say I'm with Brad, and I don't like that. It reminds me of those awful Hillary ads where people would say I'm with her. And here's the funniest: when Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton, they said, "We want you to make an ad where you say I'm with her," and he's like, "No."
And here was his opponent, correct?
One of his opponents.
In the primary, right? His primary opponent.
This is Michelle Caruso Cabrera. She ran against AOC for Congress and she lost. And she was it was really funny. She was calling herself MCC when she was running against AOC.
Enough with the politicians. Enough with the incompetence. I'm a Latina, an outsider, no ties to the city's political establishment. I'll fight for diversity and inclusion and force our leaders to help those most in need. Michelle Caruso Cabrera, paid for by MCC for Controller, Inc. Shouldn't our citywide
she's
leaders
still doing that
reflect our
MCC thing, I
communities?
see.
I'm a Latina political
signs.
outsider who will
But it
fight
is
for our
interesting
working families.
because
I'll fight
if you
for
talk
real
about,
jobs that
Democrats
benefit
standing
all
up
New
for
Yorkers.
values, not
Michelle
for
Caruso
people.
Cabrera, paid for by MCC for Controller, Inc.
Like if you talk about Democrats standing up for values and not for people, her ad was all about her values. The other guy's ad was just about who he knows.
Who he knows.
But
I mean,
MCC was also
a lot of
someone who
identity
was
there.
by the establishment. Yeah, she was basically an establishment plant, though, in the Democratic Party. So what the Democratic Party does is they do a lot of identity politics. So what they did for AOC's district was they sent us a young, attractive Latino woman with 3 names to call herself MCC in order to run against AOC. That's very, like, everybody saw what you did there. And then she had signs that said MCC versus AOC. That was so weird. And then when she lost, she decided to run with the Working Families Party or something.
Yeah.
So she's weird. But let's look at Trump.
And that seemed like the 2 things I didn't get from those 2 ads is what the hell comptrollers do, right? I didn't get anything from that, which is like tell me what you're going to do in that position, which I know comptrollers are controlling the money of New York City, which it's a big task. You think of how much money the government spends in New York City on a day-to-day basis, and the ads
to be honest, imagine that Brad guy, or whatever his name was, getting up in his ad and saying, "I'm going to control the money I want to control the money in New York City."
Right.
Look, Ocasio-Cortez. I know.
Yeah. No, it's.
I mean, I kind of feel like that's a bad dialogue. Not
if it's one thing,
he's trying to paint himself as a progressive because he got AOC and he got Elizabeth Warren.
And AOC didn't like his primary opponent, right?
Exactly.
I think your ad would have went better if you had Warren and AOC saying, well, this is how he's going to spend this money. This is how he's going to try to keep, something that lets me like how he's going to be at comptroller,
And now the young people who are lefties in New York are celebrating him But you don't even know what he's gonna do. You can't celebrate him
Or
yet.
what he's
You don't know what he's gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all right, let's go on to the Trump story.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
We don't have a lot of time, but let's talk about your future plans. Now, I have a funny. Let me ask the crowd of everybody here, would you like to see the president run again in 2024?
The volume is cut.
You're not going to answer, but I have to ask. Where are you in the process of, let me ask you this, without giving the answer what the answer is, have you made up your mind?
Yes. All right, let's stop right there. So essentially, he didn't ask him if he's going to run for president. He didn't ask him if he's not going to run for president. He just said, have you made up your mind?
We don't have a lot.
Yeah,
We'll
I
see where
mean,
he is rallying, right? That doesn't mean that he wants to run for president. It could be something else, but he is starting his the rallies again, I heard. So see how that goes.
Now, everybody thinks, now, if you run Joe Biden again against Trump, or if you run for the Democrats, if they run Joe Biden again, or if they run Kamala Harris, it's not going to work. Joe Biden, during the primaries, had the perfect storm to win the primaries, and then had the perfect storm to beat Trump. He got lucky in the primaries. He was so below. He got lucky in the general. He's one of the weakest candidates you'll ever see. If he runs against Trump again, the Democrats are going to completely embarrass themselves because he's been doing nothing since he got there.
The reason why that is the case is because you have to give a reason for people to vote for you, not against another candidate, but for you. Trump at least gives his base
against another candidate. That was Hillary's argument too, right? Like how for someone who's like this and like that.
And Biden barely ekes out a win against one of the most hated politicians of our lifetime. Right?
Yeah.
You know, you'd think it would be a landslide victory for anyone that wasn't this hated candidate, right? But no, obviously people feel weird about
He's gonna run again, honestly. I mean, it would take to run again. He's done it before. Why would he do it again? And second of all, it would take a lot for the Republican Party to get on board with it. Right? Once he lost an election, I don't know if they'd be willing to compromise another election as opposed to taking someone younger.
I don't think they would have a choice, right?
Well, the thing is, they wouldn't have a choice.
You'd have to go through a primary, and Trump, I guarantee you, would win another Republican primary. Guaranteed.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the case as well. And
I don't know. I think a lot of people will probably say you've had your chance.
I think 30%, 40% of Republicans feel that way. But the rest of them are like the guy and wanted him to win and still feel like he should have won, right?
I think probably 30% of Republicans would vote for him again.
Yeah. And
say,
if he's in
like him or you've had your chance.
Right. And
but
I
the
think
other thing is, if they have a fractured field again, that's the other thing is, if the Republicans have a fractured field, he'll win in a landslide because of, that's how it works when you have a fractured field.
I think people like Matt Gaetz has been working to kind of try to fill that. There's been a few people that are trying to fill that Republican.
Josh Hawley, Matt Gaetz.
You know, I think the Republicans have realized you can't run someone like Jeb. Right, you can't run milquetoast. Please clap for me, politicians.
And you saw Josh Hawley. We covered his poll. Remember, he was polling at 0%. I think we covered it here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't like.
And then the Democrats will also say, whether it's Joe Biden running again or whether it's Kamala Harris, you are not allowed to primary these candidates because they've been anointed.
Yeah.
We saw it with Barack Obama in 2012.
Well, the media will cover.
Everybody get out of the way. Barack Obama's coming through.
Yeah, the media will cover that in a way that's like they won't cover it. If there is primary challenges, it'll be swept under the rug like they don't mean anything, right?
And then the left doesn't even have a champion anymore. So Bernie Sanders is likely not going to run again. Elizabeth Warren has squandered all of her credibility. AOC is not going to be their candidate. The left has nobody. in the Democratic Party to even put up against a Kamala Harris
Well,
that would
you're not-
actually be significant.
I hope he does. And I think he might.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
but that's my thing.
Boston, right? He ran twice. Nobody would have thought that. And I think he has each time he runs, he does better and better.
Right.
I wouldn't put it to not run again.
Yeah.
That's true. And the other thing is, if he doesn't run again, he's going to be very significant in picking the Republican nominee. I guarantee
Yeah.
it. He will. His endorsement will carry a lot of weight. If it's not him, his endorsement will cover a lot of weight for the next nominee.
Well, and who knows what his antics are you know, he at least knows how reality show works. You know, I mean that's I've talked about this a few times with Shane and whatever. I wish more politicians on the left hand side of things decided that if this is going to be a popularity contest and a reality show, I'm gonna play it like it's one, right? Because I can get in front of a camera every 5 minutes and become popular. It's not that hard, right? If you're a likable person and you're talking truth to power, it should be easy for you to go on and go, hey, all these people are working against you, and here's how I'm going to try to deal with that, but I need your help. Come do this and be here for this, right? Like if that's the game, right? Trump's going to say, oh, well, the media's attacking me, and he's not wrong, because they are, right?
Now, here's
and that
what Trump did.
makes it easier.
Now, here's something Trump did. Trump and Bernie had one thing common when they ran for president. The media did not like either of them. Now, what Trump did was he called into Fox and Friends. What if Bernie Sanders called into MSNBC's morning every morning?
Yeah, they won't.
And said,
They
hey,
won't
Bernie
let that
Sanders
happen.
is on the line. He'd like to talk to Rachel Maddow, please.
Look, Trump.
You gotta give it to Trump, if you don't, whether you like him or don't. I mean, he's a fighter. He pushed his way into that seat.
How
How
soon
many presidents do you know would have called in to a radio station or a TV station as a regular resident, regular person, calling in? I mean, that's balls.
Well, and you look at, like, he pushed, what is it, OAN, America New, what, like
One America News Network.
One America News Network, and that had nobody watching other than maybe Trump. And then the minute he says that he would rather their ratings go through the roof, right? Like, he controls a big population of the base. I don't really know how, because the southern people I talked to, if it was before the elections, would have said, fucking Trump's a Yankee carpetbagger who don't need to be here, right? They would have thrown him out with every other, Yankee trying to tell them what to do, especially one from New York, right? Especially a businessman from New York. They'd be like, nah, he's not allowed at the barbecue,
He fought his way in. He did. Yep. He wasn't here, and he wasn't going down without a fit.
I think it's time for us to wrap at this point.
Absolutely, but that final thing is Bernie Sanders could have done the exact same thing that Trump did. Even on Fox, he could have called Fox and Friends in the morning.
Yeah,
they would have taken his call. I'm sure they would have. Bernie's on. Great.
The things he did on Fox were pretty successul. So
exactly. That strategy is never going to be replicated again. But it was actually a masterful strategy.
Yep. I mean, I guarantee. I had people definitely during those elections. If it was Clinton or Trump, it was Trump. If it was Bernie Trump, they would have picked Bernie. These were hardcore conservatives that knew that guy was what's up and would have rather him than Trump. So I think the Democratic Party definitely screwed a pooch somewhere.
Republicans and conservatives, they really choose by person. And Hillary Clinton kind of shady, and she wasn't honest and truthful with everyone.
Yeah.
We didn't know who he was. It was a wild card. Trump, we know. Bernie, no. I think, that's kind of how a lot of conservatives pick who they want.
But anyway,
exactly.
I wanted to make sure everyone hits that subscribe button. Go find Yehudis on Twitter, right? Her handle is there on the screen, right? And hit that bell, subscribe, hit the like button. Go check out our socials as well. At KRTD Media on all of those, right? My socials on screen as well.
Yeah, the next Friday we usually start our show at 6 with Joe Evans. We're starting it at 8. But everybody tune in for that. Thanks everybody for joining us. Bye.
Monday we have Franco. Come check that out.
Oh yeah, Monday we got KRTD Chopper interview. Everybody check him out. He's great.
Yep. All right, you guys are